Have you ever wondered why a man becomes haunted by the silence of a woman he once believed he understood? Why her absence speaks louder than her words? Ever could, echoing in the private chambers of his mind, long after she's gone. There is something both sacred and unsettling about the quiet withdrawal of the feminine. It's not revenge, nor performance. It is a mirror, the most merciless kind. For in her stillness, he sees himself for the very first time. When a woman detaches, something ancient stirs in the masculine psyche. Jung called it the anima confrontation, the moment a man's unconscious feminine rises within him, demanding he face what he has long denied. Her silence is not a punishment, it's a catalyst. It calls forth his shadow, forcing him to confront his dependency on control, admiration, and validation. A man who once measured his worth through conquest suddenly finds himself powerless before a gaze that no longer looks back. To the uninitiated, her silence feels cruel, but to the awakened, it is sacred discipline. The woman who withdraws does not vanish from love. She vanishes from illusion. She no longer plays the emotional theater where his ego writes the script and her empathy performs it. She steps behind the curtain, not to hide, but to reclaim her authorship. It's in this withdrawal that she begins to embody the essence of Stoic wisdom, the kind Seneca spoke of when he wrote, "He who is brave is free." Her bravery is not loud. It's the kind that trembles quietly, the kind that walks away from chaos while still bleeding from it. And the man left behind in the echo of that absence begins his descent. He doesn't know it yet, but what he misses isn't her presence. It's the part of himself she awakened. He longs for the reflection of his better nature that shone in her eyes. When she withdraws, the mirror shatters. He's left with fragments, memories that burn, moments that hum like static, questions with no answers. He calls it obsession, but in truth, it is the psyche's hunger for wholeness. This is where the obsession is born not from love, but from projection. The woman had become his unconscious fantasy, the healer, the muse, the redeemer of his unspoken wounds. And when she leaves, he feels stripped bare. The withdrawal of her attention exposes the void his ego had tried to cover with noise. Her silence becomes a labyrinth in which he loses himself, mistaking longing for love, possession for devotion. She, on the other hand, is no longer chasing validation. Her silence is not emptiness. It's space, sacred space, the kind of space that calls back her energy from every man, every moment, every memory that drained it. In the stillness, she remembers who she was before she was reduced to a reflection of someone else's needs. She begins to realize that the one who listens inwardly holds far more power than the one who argues outwardly. This is the paradox Jung understood well. When the feminine withdraws, the masculine awakens, but not through her return through his reckoning. And until he meets his own darkness with humility, her silence will remain the echo of his unhealed soul. The days that follow her silence are not quiet for him. They are deafening. Every hour becomes an interrogation, every memory a trial. He replays their moments together as if decoding a sacred text, searching for the line where her warmth began to cool. Yet what he cannot see is that her silence didn't begin with him. It began the moment she stopped betraying herself to be understood. A woman's silence is rarely born of indifference. It is the final act of self-respect after countless unseen battles. To the outside world, it appears calm, serene, even, but inside, there's the controlled burn of transformation. The Stoics called this apatheia, the disciplined mastery of emotion. She feels everything, but she is no longer governed by it. She has learned that responding to chaos only feeds it. And that true power often looks like nothing at all. In the mythology of the psyche, silence is initiation. It's Persephone descending into the underworld, not as a victim, but as a queen reclaiming dominion over her shadows. When she withdraws, she isn't disappearing. She's descending. Every woman who has ever chosen stillness over argument knows this descent, the quiet rebellion of no longer explaining herself to those committed to misunderstanding her. And somewhere, the man begins to unravel. His ego, which once thrived on her emotional engagement, finds itself starved. He feels the disquiet of Jung's shadow confrontation, that uncomfortable awareness of what lies beneath his charm, his confidence, his control. Her silence reflects it all back to him. Without her reactions to define himself against, he meets his own emptiness. He remembers the way she used to look at him, not with adoration, but with presence. That look that pierced deeper than flattery ever could, the one that saw through him and into him at once. Now, in her absence, he realizes it wasn't submission he wanted from her. It was validation that he was worthy of being seen. But the tragedy of the unconscious man is this. He mistakes being seen for being owned. He doesn't yet understand that the woman's gaze was never a trophy. It was a mirror of his potential. When she withdraws that gaze, he mistakes it for loss. But it's revelation. The same woman who once soothed his ego now confronts it with stillness. The same voice that once comforted his insecurities now speaks only in silence. And that silence, vast, cold, unyielding, becomes the stage where his illusions die. He begins to dream of her, not as she was, but as his psyche remakes her ethereal, untouchable, cloaked in mystery. The mind does this when it cannot bear reality. It turns a person into a symbol. Jung called this anima projection. The man idealizes the woman who embodied his unlived emotional life. She becomes the bridge to his soul, the forbidden doorway he both fears and desires to cross. Meanwhile, she walks through her own night, but unlike him, she is not lost. Her silence is not confusion, it's calibration. She is learning that love without peace is simply performance, and that peace without self-connection is emptiness. Her stillness is her medicine. Every unanswered call, every unsent message, every breath withheld becomes an act of self-restoration. Because when a woman becomes his silent obsession, she has already ceased to be his possession. She belongs again to herself, and that is the one thing he can neither conquer nor forget. In the stillness she cultivates, something shifts not in him first, but in her. The woman who once poured herself into understanding him now turns that same depth inward. She begins to see that her empathy was never the problem. It was her direction. For years, she had mistaken emotional labor for love, believing that if she could only explain a little better, love a little harder, stay a little longer, she could heal what was broken in him. But the truth she discovers in silence is far simpler and far more powerful. What is broken in another cannot be healed through your abandonment of self. This is where she transcends the archetype of the caregiver and steps into that of the sovereign. Jung would call this individuation, the process of becoming whole. No longer ruled by projection or emotional dependency. Her silence is not merely a refusal to engage. It is an act of spiritual alignment. She withdraws, not because she lacks love, but because she finally understands that real love cannot survive where there is no reciprocity of awareness. She cannot be both the mirror and the muse, both the healer and the wound. Meanwhile, the man begins to wander through a psychological desert. He cannot articulate the longing, because it isn't her physical absence that torments him. It's the confrontation with himself. For the first time, he feels the weight of his own disconnection, the barren landscape left behind by years of external pursuit. Every woman he meets now becomes a reflection of the one who no longer answers. Each new conversation feels hollow, each victory tinged with an unnamed grief. He begins to sense what the Stoics warned, that desire, unexamined, enslaves. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have." Her silence forces him to see how much of his life was built upon control of image, of affection, of outcome. Now, stripped of it, he meets the rawness of being unmasked. His obsession deepens, not because he loves her, but because she represents the mystery. He cannot dominate the mystery that terrifies and calls him in equal measure. Yet even as he spirals inward, something in her softens not toward him, but toward herself. Her silence begins to bloom into understanding. She realizes she no longer needs to explain her boundaries, no longer needs to justify her withdrawal. True detachment, she learns, is not bitterness, it's clarity. It's the ability to hold love without clinging, to see another's chaos without being consumed by it. In this stage, she embodies what Jung described as the integrated feminine, both receptive and discerning, compassionate yet immovable. She is no longer performing peace, she has become it. And from this peace, she radiates a new kind of magnetism, one that doesn't seduce through drama, but through depth. The men around her feel it, though they can't name it. It's the silent power of a woman who no longer needs to be chosen, because she already chose herself. And somewhere, deep in the quiet corners of his mind, the man senses this shift. He feels her energy detach not angrily, but irrevocably. It's this quiet finality that haunts him more than any goodbye ever could, because words can be argued with. But silence becomes eternal. There comes a moment subtle yet seismic, when her absence no longer feels like an act, but an atmosphere. It isn't that she's gone. It's that her energy no longer orbits him. He can sense it, the way one senses the change in air before a storm. Once, she was the gravitational pull that kept his world in motion. Now, she has become the quiet sky that refuses to respond to thunder. He can shout, he can confess, he can promise, but there's no echo left to return. This is the phase of psychic separation, the unseen divorce between illusion and essence. Jung wrote that every relationship begins as a mirror, and ends as a revelation. The mirror once reflected beauty, but now it reveals distortion. He sees, perhaps for the first time, how much of what he called love was projection. He didn't love her. He loved the idea of being reflected in her light. He loved the validation that came from being desired by someone with depth. But when that light turns inward, when she stops revolving around his emotional gravity, he must confront the void that admiration once disguised. Her silence becomes unbearable, precisely because it is not a punishment. If she screamed, he could fight back. If she wept, he could soothe. But her stillness robs him of a role. It leaves him naked in the absence of noise. The male ego, stripped of its stage, trembles under the weight of irrelevance. It's not rejection that destroys him. It's indifference. For in her silence, he realizes something devastating. She no longer seeks to be understood by him. She no longer measures her worth through his perception. She is free. This freedom terrifies him, not because he hates it, but because he secretly craves it for himself. Her detachment mirrors the spiritual liberation he's never known. The kind that comes when one stops performing and begins existing. Yet, his obsession deepens, because the human mind clings most tightly to what reflects its own unfinished story. He dreams of her voice, her touch, her laughter, not as she was, but as an archetype, the eternal feminine, the unattainable embodiment of what he has yet to integrate. Jung warned that until a man faces his inner feminine, he will forever seek her outside himself, turning every relationship into a repetition of his unconscious longing. Meanwhile, she walks lighter. Her silence no longer feels like armor, but air. The detachment that once felt cold now feels sacred. She begins to understand the paradox of power, that the one who can leave quietly holds the deepest influence. Every moment she chooses stillness over reaction. She deepens her inner sovereignty. The feminine within her intuitive, nurturing, fierce is no longer fragmented. She has faced her own shadow, seen the part of herself that once begged for crumbs, and blessed it with closure. To others, she seems distant, but to those who look closer, she radiates something extraordinary, peace with an edge. It's the energy of a woman who has walked through emotional fire and emerged unburned. Her beauty is no longer ornamental, it's existential. It doesn't demand to be seen. It invites the world to rise to its frequency. And somewhere, the man who once thought he had power over her begins to sense the truth. He was never addicted to her body, her smile, or even her love. He was addicted to the way she made him feel alive. And now that she's gone, he realizes she was never his to begin with. What haunts him most is not her absence, but her evolution. He sees her from afar, perhaps on a street he once walked her home along, or through a photo that drifts onto his screen, and something inside him twists. She looks untouched by his memory, not in arrogance, but in peace. That serenity, that soft self-possession is unbearable to the part of him that once believed she needed his attention to feel whole, because now she moves like someone who has made peace with both love and loss. And that is a power he's never known how to hold. The silence she offered him was never void. It was mirror, medicine, and initiation. He just never learned to listen. In the quiet she left behind, he continues to wrestle with himself, torn between wanting her back and realizing he can't approach her the same way. His attempts to reappear in her orbit carry the weight of his unintegrated ego. He sends messages dressed in nostalgia, gestures that beg for acknowledgement, but she no longer responds to old language. Her silence has become a new dialect, one he cannot yet speak. She, on the other hand, no longer defines herself by being misunderstood. There was a time when she felt invisible, when her silence was mistaken for submission. But she has come to understand what the Stoics and the mystics knew, that control over one's reactions is the truest form of power. She doesn't need to prove her strength. Her restraint is her strength. Every unanswered call, every unspoken defense, every breath she saves for herself is a reclamation of life force, once spent trying to explain what never wanted to understand. In this space, she touches something profoundly spiritual, a sense of sacred detachment, not coldness, not cynicism, but a grounded compassion. She feels the sadness of what was, yet she no longer wishes to return. Her silence is not revenge. It's requiem, a quiet funeral for the version of herself that once sought permission to exist in someone else's story. She buries that version with grace, not bitterness, and in that burial, she is reborn. Jung called this process the withdrawal of projections. It's the moment when the psyche reclaims its energy from illusions and turns inward to find its center again. The woman who once poured herself into the role of the one who understands now becomes the one who observes. She sees him as he truly is, not as villain, not as savior, but as a man still lost in his own shadow. And from that understanding comes forgiveness, not for his sake, but for her freedom, because forgiveness, when awakened, is not agreement. It is release. She has entered the rare psychological territory of individuation, where peace no longer depends on validation, and love no longer requires attachment. She begins to live by an inner law rather than emotional reaction. She becomes both moon and mountain, reflective yet unmovable, gentle yet vast. There's a quiet dignity in her now, the kind that commands attention without seeking it. It's the same dignity that ancient philosophers saw in the serene, a kind of divine composure that cannot be bought, only earned through pain, understood and transformed. And though he doesn't fully grasp it, he feels it. Every part of him that once sought her approval now aches for the calm she embodies. His obsession turns inward, as it must, forcing him to confront the one truth her silence was always teaching, that love cannot save a man who will not meet himself. In the late hours of night, when distractions fade and masks fall, he begins to feel the full weight of what her silence means. It isn't rejection, it's reflection. Every unanswered message becomes a lesson in impermanence. Every quiet day, a reminder that the world will not bend to soothe his ego. The same silence he once found unbearable begins to expose what was hidden beneath his noise, the deep, unacknowledged hunger for meaning, for peace, for something that no external affection could ever sustain. Jung described this descent as the meeting with the shadow, the moment when a man is stripped of illusion and forced to face the parts of himself he has disowned. Her silence, in truth, was never meant to punish him. It was meant to awaken him. She became the archetypal mirror, the feminine force that reveals not what flatters, but what is real. Through her absence, he meets himself, his pride, his loneliness, his dependency on being needed. It is brutal, it is holy, it is necessary, and somewhere in that confrontation, the storm begins to settle. He starts to understand why she left, not because she stopped caring, but because she could no longer participate in his unconsciousness. Her silence had boundaries, and boundaries are the language of self-respect. He begins to see that love without self-awareness is only repetition dressed as romance. He remembers her eyes, how they saw through him not in judgment, but in knowing, and realizes now that what terrified him most was the way she reflected everything he wasn't yet ready to see. While he wrestles with his awakening, her journey has already moved beyond the need for his recognition. The silence that once felt like armor now feels like truth. She no longer fears being misunderstood, because she no longer explains herself to misunderstanding. She has reclaimed her own rhythm. Her mornings are slower, her thoughts gentler. Where she once waited for closure, she now breathes it. What once felt like loneliness now feels like vastness. The spaciousness that appears when one stops grasping for what has already served its purpose. She understands now that emotional withdrawal isn't abandonment. It's alchemy. It is how the soul refines itself, transmuting pain into presence. The same love that once tethered her becomes her teacher, reminding her that attachment is not intimacy and that self-possession is not isolation. She no longer seeks intensity, she seeks harmony. She no longer clings to potential, she honors what is. And in that quiet recognition, her power multiplies. The men who cross her path now sense it instantly, the difference between a woman who desires to be chosen and one who simply chooses. Her calm unnerves those still addicted to chaos. Her silence draws out the truth in everyone around her. She no longer argues, persuades, or pleads. She simply observes who can meet her in the depth where she now lives. That depth, once mistaken for mystery, is simply peace. A peace that cost her every illusion she ever had about love. As for him, he carries her energy like a haunting melody, one that will follow him through every shallow encounter, every echo of what he thought he wanted. He will meet her again, perhaps not in body, but in essence, in every woman who demands his honesty, in every silence that won't comfort his avoidance. And perhaps then, he will understand what her stillness was always teaching, that obsession fades, but truth remains. In the late hours of night, when distractions fade and masks fall, he begins to feel the full weight of what her silence means. It isn't rejection, it's reflection. Every unanswered message becomes a lesson in impermanence. Every quiet day, a reminder that the world will not bend to soothe his ego. The same silence he once found unbearable begins to expose what was hidden beneath his noise, the deep, unacknowledged hunger for meaning, for peace, for something that no external affection could ever sustain. Jung described this descent as the meeting with the shadow, the moment when a man is stripped of illusion and forced to face the parts of himself he has disowned. her silence, in truth, was never meant to punish him. It was meant to awaken him. She became the archetypal mirror, the feminine force that reveals not what flatters, but what is real. Through her absence, he meets himself, his pride, his loneliness, his dependency on being needed. It is brutal, it is holy, it is necessary. And somewhere in that confrontation, the storm begins to settle. He starts to understand why she left, not because she stopped caring, but because she could no longer participate in his unconsciousness. Her silence had boundaries, and boundaries are the language of self-respect. He begins to see that love without self-awareness is only repetition dressed as romance. He remembers her eyes, how they saw through him not in judgment, but in knowing, and realizes now that what terrified him most was the way she reflected everything he wasn't yet ready to see. While he wrestles with his awakening, her journey has already moved beyond the need for his recognition. The silence that once felt like armor now feels like truth. She no longer fears being misunderstood, because she no longer explains herself to misunderstanding. She has reclaimed her own rhythm. Her mornings are slower, her thoughts gentler. Where she once waited for closure, she now breathes it. What once felt like loneliness now feels like vastness, the spaciousness that appears when one stops grasping for what has already served its purpose. She understands now that emotional withdrawal isn't abandonment. It's alchemy. It is how the soul refines itself, transmuting pain into presence. The same love that once tethered her becomes her teacher, reminding her that attachment is not intimacy and that self-possession is not isolation. She no longer seeks intensity. She seeks harmony. She no longer clings to potential. She honors what is, and in that quiet recognition, her power multiplies. The men who cross her path now sense it instantly. The difference between a woman who desires to be chosen and one who simply chooses. Her calm unnerves those still addicted to chaos. Her silence draws out the truth in everyone around her. She no longer argues, persuades, or pleads. She simply observes who can meet her in the depth where she now lives. That depth, once mistaken for mystery, is simply peace. A peace that cost her every illusion she ever had about love. As for him, he carries her energy like a haunting melody, one that will follow him through every shallow encounter, every echo of what he thought he wanted. He will meet her again, perhaps not in body, but in essence, in every woman who demands his honesty, in every silence that won't comfort his avoidance. And perhaps then, he will understand what her stillness was always teaching. That obsession fades, but truth remains. There comes a morning when she wakes and realizes there is no ache left. The silence that once felt heavy now feels like home. She has walked through the long corridor of emotional noise and emerged into something simple, luminous, unburdened. The obsession he carries has dissolved into memory. His face, once vivid in her mind, has become just another symbol, an archetype of her own awakening. For the first time, she understands that peace is not the absence of love, but the absence of confusion. She no longer seeks to be remembered. She has learned that the most powerful transformations happen unseen. Her silence, once mistaken for coldness, has become her sanctuary, proof that she no longer needs to prove. She moves through her day like one who has nothing to prove and nothing to hide. Her energy, once scattered across 100 emotional negotiations, now gathers inward, forming the steady flame of self-possession. It glows quietly, not to attract, but to illuminate. He, meanwhile, lives with the echo of what he could not grasp. Sometimes he feels it when he hears her name, or when another woman looks at him with the same softness she once did. It stirs a ghost in him, a reminder of the mirror he once fled from. Her silence has become his initiation. Too, whether he knows it or not, she has placed him on his own path toward awakening. Because no man forgets the woman who withdraws with dignity. She becomes the blueprint of the feminine he must learn to honor if he ever wishes to love without fear. In the grand architecture of human connection, such women serve a sacred purpose. They are not here to be conquered, nor to be idealized. They arrive to awaken, to confront illusions, to teach that love, when unconscious, becomes bondage, but when conscious, becomes liberation. Her silence was the bridge between those worlds, between his projection and her truth. As she continues forward, she no longer divides her heart between past and future. Her solitude feels full. She understands that the power she carries isn't something she gained from detachment. It's what was always there once the noise fell away. She can love again, but differently now, not as rescue, not as surrender, but as recognition, two whole beings meeting without demand. This is the final transformation of the awakened feminine. She loves without losing herself. She gives without grasping. She walks away without anger. The world may call it mystery, but Jung would call it integration. the moment the psyche unites its shadow and light, its longing and restraint. It is the arrival of the self, calm and unshakable. And so, she moves through life not with vengeance, but with vision. Her silence no longer isolates. It radiates. She has become what he once sought in her and failed to possess. Peace in motion, power in quiet, beauty without need. And for those who meet her now, her presence is unmistakable, not because she tries to be seen, but because she no longer fears being invisible. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. If this message found you today, let it stay with you. If it resonated, leave a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more reflections like this one. Your voice matters here. Tell us in the comments what part of this truth spoke to you most.